What did you make of that, Jordan, to be suddenly appearing on Meghan Markle's podcast as a villain?
The first
who was
thing I make
calling
of
women
it
crazy
is that she. Yeah, well, the first thing I make of it is that her voice drips with the same falsehood that the voice of Kamala Harris drips with. It's this sanctimonious, faux compassionate, talking down to her audience and trying to be sure that we're all really on the same compassionate page here, and we're all being victimized by terrible forces that are arrayed against us, and none of that's really fair. And it's just great.
Meghan Markle does not represent black people in the United States. I don't know if you knew that.
No question she doesn't. Sorry, I'm very familiar. Doesn't represent anybody.
Of course
other
not.
than a very elite, hypocritical group of people.
I'm Megan Sussex, and I'm a good person. And I'm meeting another good person today, the wonderful Ariana Grande.
Oh my God, Megan, you're such a good person.
Yes, that's why I'm going to talk to you like you're an idiot.
30 Minutes interview was a great chance to hear Harry and Meghan's story, in case you missed their 2-hour sit-down with Oprah or their 6-part Netflix documentary.
Harry and Meghan, we don't give a f***. America don't give a f*** about you.
Goddamn right.
Keep your shows, keep your drama, keep all that nonsense. That's for you British people to fake care about. We do not give a f***. We don't care.
We don't care. Let me tell you something. We don't care.
Harry, get your limey ginger ass down here and clear this up!
Meg does her little phony like, I'm so busy just doing like so much wealthy stuff. I have the show, the podcast, I'm a duchess, I have all this wealth. It's just so many busy things as a wealthy person.
So busy?
It was so fake. I was like,
Harry, whose memoir just broke the Guinness record for fastest selling nonfiction book of all time. The story of Prince Harold and his frozen yogurt slinger is so popular, they're now releasing a version for kids. I don't know if you know about this. It's a twist on The Princess and the Pea. It's called The Prince and the Penis, and it's
Because too many pieces. The moment this happened, people leaned in. Not because of shouting, not because of chaos, but because of how quiet it was. Jordan Peterson sat there, calm, controlled, almost surgical, and completely dismantled a narrative that had been carefully wrapped for years. No raised voice, no insults, just precision. Jordan Peterson just did something nobody expected. He didn't rant. He didn't perform. He walked onto Piers Morgan Uncensored and calmly took Meghan Markle's story apart piece by piece. And the timing couldn't have been worse for her, because before this, she had already tried to borrow his words. She'd used his ideas on her podcast, framing them to suggest women are dismissed as irrational, hoping his credibility would shield her argument. But instead of standing behind her from a distance, he showed up himself. And the second he did, that borrowed shield disappeared. What made it sting wasn't aggression, it was clarity. He didn't let the emotional framing distract from the structure underneath. He didn't let sentiment replace logic. And suddenly, the audience could see the outline of something they'd felt for a long time but couldn't quite explain. Then came the moment that flipped the mood entirely. She played that audio clip thinking it was
Psychopaths exploit, and they get a reputation for doing so quite quickly. And then people avoid them and stop working with them. And so it doesn't work over the medium to long run as a general rule.
In her case, thinking it would boost sympathy, thinking it would lock in her position. Instead, it detonated. Jordan Peterson didn't soften his words, he didn't pad them, he called it dishonest, flat out. And in seconds, he exposed the victim routine for what it was. Not confusion, not vulnerability, a pattern. And just when viewers thought that was the peak, Piers Morgan leaned forward and dropped something personal. Something firsthand. Piers Morgan didn't speak as a commentator here. He spoke as someone who knew her before the titles, before the global spotlight, before the carefully managed image. He talked about shared drinks, friendly conversations, a connection that seemed real. And then he talked about the night it all stopped. The night she met Prince Harry. One moment they were in touch. The next, nothing. Silence. Like a switch had been flipped. That detail lingered because it matched something people had seen before. Relationships that existed until they didn't. People who mattered until they were inconvenient. And if you followed royal drama even casually, this is where things turn savage. The mockery didn't creep in quietly, it exploded. Spitting Image went where most shows were too scared to go. They didn't tiptoe, they didn't soften edges, they went straight for the jugular. Meghan parodies with no mercy, no filters, no hesitation. And then suddenly, poof, gone. Episodes wiped. Clips erased. Content scrubbed like it never existed. Lawyers stepped in. This was the line that couldn't be uncrossed. They weren't just mocking, they were exposing, turning her Netflix lifestyle content inside out, showing how shallow moments were dressed up as deep meaning. A bag of crisps treated like sacred ritual, breathing presented like forbidden wisdom, flowers slapped on to everything and sold as emotional enlightenment. It was brutal because it felt accurate. And then it got worse. The skits didn't just mock her, they flipped the power dynamic. Harry wasn't the partner, he was the prop. Frozen out, pressured, corrected. That meltdown scene where the Duchess snapped, it felt too real, too familiar, too close to something people suspected but hadn't seen spelled out so clearly. Spitting image folded under the pressure. But the damage was already done. The clips escaped anyway, they spread, they went viral, and once comedians realized there was no penalty for saying it out loud, everyone piled on. Joe Coy stood on the Golden Globe stage and didn't blink. No Hollywood protection, no polite chuckle. He went straight for the truth people whispered about Netflix money and empty returns. The room laughed because the room knew. Then Trevor Noah brought back a moment that still makes people cringe. A prince at a movie premiere, pitching his wife for voiceover work, networking like a nobody, begging Disney executives for a shot. Kingdoms used to be traded through marriage, now it's voiceover gigs and podcast deals. The downgrade was so sharp it felt unreal. And when the jokes reached Family Guy, the absurdity became permanent. Millions for nothing. Influencer deals, sponsored posts, and no one could explain what value was actually delivered. Chris Rock then walked in and blew up the foundation of the discrimination storyline with one question no one else dared to ask. The Oprah interview was supposed to lock everything in. Instead, it cracked it open. The idea that she didn't know what the royal family was, that she didn't research, that she was shocked by centuries of history, people stopped buying it. Because you don't marry into an institution like that without knowing exactly what it is. And once that disbelief set in, it spread everywhere. Saturday, Night Live joined in, late night hosts piled on, the jokes weren't cruel anymore, they were observational. And that's what made them land. The room went cold wherever they showed up, invitations dried up, even casual appearances felt forced. At that point, the brand wasn't tragic, it was parody. And that's where the internet took over. Influencers shredded the lifestyle act, moving snacks from one bag to another and selling it like revelation, pouring petals into water and calling it elegance. Ordinary actions inflated into moments of wisdom. Jordan Peterson's words echoed louder with every clip. Emotion without substance, style without meaning. People watched out of disbelief, some watched hoping it would finally make sense. And one comedian summed it up perfectly after forcing himself through the entire Netflix documentary. He went in neutral, he came out hating it because the pattern was impossible to ignore. Real issues at the start, sympathy offered, then squandered. Cringe took over. Pet names, overacting, performative vulnerability. By the end, even viewers who wanted to support them felt pushed away. And then came the yoga studio story. Even a private workout became a spectacle. Every room turned into a stage. Always performing, always watched, always managed, which brings everything back to Piers Morgan because what he described wasn't theory. It was experience, private messages, attention, constant contact, carefully maintained connection, drinks in a London pub, hours of conversation, and then one cab ride. He put her in that cab, she went to a party, she met Prince Harry. And from that moment on, nothing. Ghosted. The messages stopped, the relationship vanished, the pattern repeated. When a bigger prize appeared, the past was erased. And when Piers said it out loud, it didn't sound bitter. It sounded familiar. Because her father felt it, old friends felt it, viewers recognized it, comedians mocked it. Jordan Peterson named it. Build relationships while they're useful. Drop them when they're not, then claim victimhood when it pays. That's the pattern people can't unsee now. And after everything that's come out, after every joke, every receipt, every first-hand account, the question hanging in the air isn't cruel. It's simple. Can she actually come back from this? And here's the part people don't like admitting out loud. None of this collapsed because of one interview. Not Jordan Peterson, not Piers Morgan, not a comedian's joke. It collapsed because too many pieces started lining up at the same time, and once they did, the illusion couldn't hold. When Jordan Peterson talked about staged empathy, people felt felt uncomfortable because it hit close. The pauses. The soft voice. The carefully chosen words that sounded deep but never actually said anything. That's what audiences had been sensing for years without having the language to explain it. Once he named it, everything else snapped into focus. And then Piers Morgan's stories stopped sounding petty and started sounding familiar. The love bombing, the constant messages, the curated closeness, the way attention was poured on thick until something better appeared. And when it did, silence. Not a slow fade, a clean cut. Like a door slammed shut. That's why the wedding detail landed so hard. One family member. One. Not because the rest didn't exist, but because they didn't fit the picture. They were inconvenient, they were messy, they couldn't be controlled. And suddenly, Jordan Peterson's warning wasn't abstract anymore. It was visible. The public didn't turn cruel overnight. They turned observant. Every parody that followed worked because it wasn't exaggerating. It was simplifying, stripping away the emotional soundtrack and showing the behavior underneath. That's why Spitting Image felt dangerous. Not because it was mean, but because it showed the power dynamic too clearly. Harry shrinking, Meghan directing, correcting, freezing him out mid-sentence. That wasn't comedy. That was recognition. And once recognition happens, sympathy evaporates fast. The Netflix content didn't help. People went in ready to listen, ready to understand, ready to empathize. And they came out exhausted. 6 episodes of grievance wrapped in branding. Real pain diluted by performance. Important conversations buried under theatrics. Viewers didn't feel educated. They felt manipulated. That's why the jokes kept landing harder instead of softer. Because humor thrives where truth leaks through. When Chris Rock asked how someone could marry into one of the most documented families on earth and claim ignorance, the laughter wasn't mocking pain. It was rejecting dishonesty. And the more she insisted she didn't know, the less believable it sounded. Didn't know about bowing. Didn't know about castles. Didn't know about race. Didn't know about hierarchy. Didn't know about history. At some point, ignorance stops sounding innocent and starts sounding strategic. That's when late night hosts stopped treating it gently. That's when Snell turned it into a running gag. That's when influencers tore apart the lifestyle branding frame by frame. Pretzels repackaged, water dressed up, flowers slapped on everything and sold as meaning. It wasn't hate, it was disbelief. Because real wisdom doesn't need performance. People started asking why everything felt like a pitch. Why every moment felt staged. Why vulnerability always came with a camera angle. Why even yoga needed an audience. Why nothing could just exist quietly. And then there was Harry, once a prince who carried public sympathy after tragedy, slowly reduced to a punchline, not because of cruelty, but because of contrast. A man who gave up everything only to wander red carpets pitching voiceover gigs. A royal legacy traded for influencer sponsorships. A life of duty swapped for branding deals. That's not a fall from grace, that's a rebrand gone wrong. And the more Meghan pushed the victim narrative, the more people noticed who kept getting dropped along the way. Friends, colleagues, family, even her own father. The pattern repeated too cleanly to ignore. When someone no longer served the image, they disappeared. Then later, they were framed as toxic, dangerous, or harmful. That's not trauma response. That's control. By the time Piers Morgan said the word ghosted, the audience didn't gasp. They nodded. Because they'd seen it before. Maybe not with her, but with people like her. The kind who collect allies until they don't need them. The kind who curate relationships the way others curate feeds. And here's the part that stings the most. None of this required digging. No leaked documents, no secret tapes, no private investigators. It all played out in public. On podcasts, on talk shows, on Netflix, on red carpets, in jokes, in silences. That's why the backlash feels permanent. Because it wasn't fueled by rumor. It was fueled by repetition. Every time she spoke, she confirmed the pattern. Every time she explained, she revealed more gaps. Every time she framed herself as misunderstood, people remembered who was missing from the room. Jordan Peterson warned about fake compassion. Piers Morgan experienced opportunism. Comedians exposed performance. Influencers highlighted emptiness. Viewers walked away drained. It all pointed in the same direction, and now the brand is stuck. Too famous to reset. Too exposed to reinvent. Too performative to feel sincere again. The audience doesn't hate, they don't rage, they don't even argue anymore, they shrug. And indifference is the hardest thing to come back from. So when people ask if she can recover, the answer isn't about public forgiveness, it's about credibility. Once people stop believing your emotions are real, no amount of explanation fixes it. Because trust doesn't come back with another interview, it comes back with silence. And that might be the one thing she's never learned to use. Never learned to use. Never learned to use.